think it's going to be long? I'm like, no.
No, it's not a long bill. So we're calling the meeting to order at 12:47. I will resend the Korea bill for everyone to read again. On our agenda today, we were going to move from the state to local concerns. At the state level, things are about to change really abruptly. So we had two bills. We had one in the Assembly, moving from the Assembly, and one moving from the State Senate. So in the Assembly, we had Tom Amiano's bill, which was the same bill as AB 2312. The same bill as, it's the same thing he's introduced for the last couple of years that patient advocates have pretty universally rejected because it included hampering some of the SB 420 rights, which allows patients to collectively cultivate for each other. It invaded Prop 215. It put the alcohol beverage control as our lead oversee, and not only did the patient advocates have an issue with ABC being our oversee, ironically enough, law enforcement was also pointing out, why would you have such a corrupt agency? The overhead. So it's not like, it's kind of universally known that ABC is sort of corrupt in California, and even if you go online for 1 minute and type it in, you get, you know, a slew of stories that would, you know, make any patient advocate question the appeal of that. Not to mention alcohol beverage control does have a league of sort of narco warriors that have been on intra-agency task force and gone and chopped down plants and etc., right? So there might be one cool policy guy, but the guy out on the street, the guy doing the actions and going even to the bars and stuff and rolling them over for favors and what have you, I mean, like, we'd want that, right? So that finally has ended. It did not get out of the Assembly. It got killed. Then on the other side, yes, that's very good. I mean, who knows? He'll probably enter it again.
Yeah, probably he already did twice.
Right? But not even twice. This is the third or fourth time that he's entered it, right? Then on the other side, on the flip side, you have Senator Correa's bill. And Senator Correa's bill started off with something that the patients and law enforcement actually agreed upon, which was having the health department be the oversight for medical cannabis, because, geez, that only made sense. But we didn't get an agreement from the health department on that, so it switched to the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is, to me, worlds better than the ABC. Yeah. It's not the health department, it's not our first choice, but it's still worlds better than alcohol beverage control. But there are things in the Correa bill that are really alarming, but first let me say that it got out of the Senate unanimously. There was not a single senator that voted against it. It was put together primarily by the League of Cities and by a variety of law enforcement lobbyists. So, yeah.
You said about the Board of Health saying no. Are you talking about the State Board of Health?
Correct.
And isn't it, I mean, do their executives have the right to just blanketly say no without the voters voting on?
But the voters aren't voting on this. The legislator is, and they wanted to find an agreed, you know, somebody. I'm assuming their thought is, if we have to fight the health department who's saying that they don't have the capability of doing the oversee, and you already have like hookah bars and other things like that under the Department of Consumer Affairs. So the hookah bars, the head shops, things along that line are being overseen by the Department of Consumer Affairs. So while the ideal fit would have been the health department. I don't think the Department of Consumer Affairs is the worst thing that's ever happened to us.
And the Department of Health is actually pretty overwhelmed with the state of what they have to deal with these days.
Affordable Care Act.
And a lot of this has more to do with business regulating and consumer affairs than actual health affairs in the
I
sense.
believe that's a positive step because towards state regulation, legalization, because consumer affairs actually regulates how much property business can regulate, and they can actually correlate MCDs like, hey, these actually are profitable businesses. They can actually be a stepping stone toward the state legalization.
True. There's a lot of problems with Korea's bill. A lot of things are going to change abruptly, and the interesting thing is online, I'm not hearing a lot of talk about it. I'm not seeing anyone other than myself and Dale Geringer from Cal Normal, Northern Cal Normal, posting any information about the Korea bill. Now, given I'm not on Americans for Safe Access website that often, but I'm not seeing a lot of people being knowledgeable that things are about to change really quickly. And that's why I also, Access of Love is going to be doing a town hall on June 14th to be able to inform people how quick this is going to change. And the inner skinny and the scary changes is that, like the Colorado system, it is a seed to sale system. So that means,
I don't like that.
that means, but it's different than Colorado because it does allow
That
for
means-
some, what?
Go back to what that means.
That means the seed to sale means that you will have registered cultivation facilities that will have, video tracking. You'll have your product, seed, plant, bud, flower, cutting down of the flower, all tracked, transportation from that facility to the distribution center.
Wow.
So
It's
all
not
of that
legal.
will
It's
be,
not legal then, really.
They don't do that for tobacco.
all of that will be tracked. Now, I agree, but also, I'm not sure if patient advocates are aware of this, but by the writing in this bill, I can see that law enforcement is aware of it and the state legislature is aware of it. A lot of the diversion of cannabis and the theft of cannabis happens from within our industry. So it's not like they're getting hijacked on the road by bandits.
Yeah.
The bandits are already inside the grow facility, and sometimes that's how pounds got slung on the side and out the back door. So there's a reason why states want this well-tracked seed to sale system, because they're saying, okay, we see the medical need for this, but we're not going to have state licensed facilities supplying another state. So they want to keep track of everything, and I see the logic in that.
Or supplying the local hoodlum that's supplying the kids.
Correct.
Isn't that similar to what they did during the Coors ban? They monitored, the state patrol monitored, was in charge of the breweries, make sure that Coors beer did not cross Mississippi.
Probably.
Yeah, and don't forget that every medication on your pharmacy shelf is tracked, so you know exactly which batch
Yeah,
it came out of.
that's the
exactly
whole
which
thing.
plant it
It's
came
not,
from,
even though it
exactly
sounds
when it was
Big Brother,
made.
it's not out of
Well,
line
yeah,
with any
that
other
America.
system that
Of
has to do with
medication.
health and medications
Right
and
on.
even
That's
alcohol and
the problem.
tobacco. I mean, they
But
don't.
here's where it gets tricky.
Except it's in herb. It's not a substance that was processed or dangerous.
True. And that's the difference between people that are working on repealing prohibition and working on decriminalization and people that are working on the legalization of medical cannabis. And I'm kind of in both realms because I need access for more people immediately. And I know the repeal of prohibition is going to take a little bit longer. But I need my friends, in every state to be able to go to an MCD. I need my grandmother to be able to go and get a tincture and feel like she can walk into a facility, and she would not walk into.
Well, I want my
She wouldn't
relative.
even walk into Access to Love, but she might walk into something that's as generic as like Spark or something like that, where it feels like really transactional and generic.
And to Denise's point, and only playing devil's advocate, not that I agree with it, but to her point, we do track even the stuff in our supermarkets as produce, which
Right, we do.
fields they came
Why
from,
can't we grow our own,
because
though?
it's organic also.
But this doesn't say that you can't grow your own. This is the big difference between Korea and law enforcement and the League of Cities and Tom Amiano working with the industry. The industry wanted to cap numbers. They wanted to make sure you weren't growing your own. They wanted to kill all of that so that they could narrow the playing field. What the cops and the law enforcement and the League of Cities are doing is trying to actually make a closed loop, safe program that they can check off that's reliable, right? So I mean, I see, I'm glad that Tom Amiano's bill didn't make it out of the assembly. I don't think many people know that we're about to change everything. And when I say change everything, I mean if we have to, while it allows for Prop 215 and SB 420, there's a carve-out, proving that you're a patient cultivating project and not letting things go out the side is going to be a difficult task for most growers, because what most growers do is they take their surplus to a dispensary for their overhead costs, they take care of the patients in their group, and then they go from there. But what this would require is that all of the growing facilities that are taken to the distribution centers be registered. So you can't take your overflow from your patient garden if you don't have a state license as a facility. And then
I can't sell my overflow, is what you're saying.
Right. Which
Under
will,
Koreans?
right. Well, you can, as long as you're state registered. The good thing about the registry is that they put in a provision that prevents it from going above just the expenses of the registry. So Tom Amiano's bill would have made registry very expensive and would allow, monopoly through, whoever's got the wealthiest investors. Korea's bill is a lesser of two evils in the sense that inside of it, it has built in that you can't go above and beyond just the price of, hey, I got to call out, let's say, Inspector Martinelli to go over to your grow facility, make sure that it's wired correctly and that it's not going to blow up. I mean,
That's reasonable.
that's reasonable. It's not out of the realm of reason what they're doing. But where it gets tricky is teaching everybody in the community that if you're found violating, so in other words, let's say some guy has, blown out a warehouse, he's got no state registration, and he's trying to bring his medicine not only into the dispensaries or whatever, right? He's got no license. They're gonna, if they find that warehouse, $35,000 a day fine for not registering. So there's a lot of motivation to register. And that's unfortunate. I mean, that's really scary. That's sad that and if that, a blown out warehouse is not going to be covered under Prop 215, which is a primary caregiver. Primary caregiver is a very high bar. Most people cannot meet it. Access to Love providers are probably some of the very few providers that could actually meet it. WHAM is another example of providers that could actually meet it because the patients are actually involved in the collective, and people are actually being provided with things outside of medicine. So they're being provided with food, they're being assisted with housing, etc. So primary caregiver in Prop 215, really high standard. So the guy with the blown out warehouse is not going to make that. Patient closed circuit patient collective. There's no way he can say that 25 pounds on the table is going to be going to his 9-person collective, right? For their personal use.
Try.
Has there been a price set for to be state regulated?
What?
Has there been a price set to be state regulated?
A price?
Yes.
How much
to file?
it's gonna be costing it?
So it's not going to go above and beyond the cost of the registry. So it's going to depend on what you're registering. If you're registering like 3 warehouses that are huge and they have to go through, you know, you might have to have an inspector go through a whole bunch of stuff, then that's going to cost more than, let's say, if somebody was doing a grow in this room right here. But the good thing is, like I said, built in is not exceeding the actual costs, which is very different from some other states. There's other states where you have to have like millions of dollars in your bank account before you even talk to them about a cannabis project, right? So I mean, it's not the worst deal, but it's bad. It's gonna mean a lot of growers in particular are gonna have to learn a lot about being compliant. It does mean that the words that, you know, are in there, which means that nearly every type of facility is going to have to register to even exchange with each other. The 3 words they use are provide, grow, and process. That's everybody.
So basically, if
That is everybody.
so basically,
Provide, grow, process. It's not sell, it's provide.
I hate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me think.
I'm moving.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say something about that. Even though we know that people with dispensaries and successful growers are making a good living when they're doing it right, agriculture is a hard job, no matter who you are. It takes smarts, it takes back bending work, you know, and then you have to employ people to help you process it, whether it's picking cherries or trimming bud.
Agriculture is agriculture.
And a lot of times in the long end, in this country, it's such a, people are getting short shifted, the government's having to subsidize farmers or pay them not to grow. But we can't have those situations. Our people have to know that the government isn't going, rules aren't going to make it, so they can't make a decent living for all the work that they're doing and putting out. You know, if they're not, you know, plus leaving patient collectives intact in their own parameters, because we're not doing it for a job. We're not doing for us. It's like you said, it's a closed.
There's very few true patient collectives. You know,
I do get that.
Very few. So most people are going to need to register. And here's another sticky little part that I'm kind of grateful that Denise isn't here for yet.
Basically, I want to see if I can break this down in layman's terms. This is saying we're not prohibiting you from growing. You just need to comply by regulations like farmers do.
Right, but it's a step further.
Because
little more than that.
organic farmers, they have to abide by regulations in order to sell their produce
Absolutely.
and their product to stores or to the neighbors. So this is saying, hey, you can grow, just got to abide by our certain regulations to grow. Am I correct?
Well, you're correct, but there's a couple other steps in there. One, there's 2 things going on that are a little bit different than just flat out agriculture. One is that you're going to need to get names and addresses, and there's a criminal and FBI file background check. So inside of the legislation, and a lot of people aren't reading the legislation and need to,
Not good with that.
there is an open channel between the local Department of Justice and the FBI. They're not specifically, like our law, our local law, is a violent felony within the past 5 years. If you're going to operate an MCD in San Francisco, you have to go and give your full life scan handprints to the DOJ, and they look for we've had that forever. And you want that.
Yeah,
Denise,
I
you want
love
that.
that.
You
No,
do
but I
not
like this
want
other
people who are gang related or involved in organized
Exactly.
crime, rapists, murderers. We don't want them running dispensaries.
I
So
feel much
I
better
went
about
and
it
did it.
myself.
The DOJ has my handprints, you know, etc. But this opens up another channel which doesn't specifically say violent crime, blah, blah, blah. It's an exchange of information between the DOJ and the FBI, and it covers anything that could be related to you running a dispensary. Now, what I figure they're looking for is white-collar crime. So, okay, you don't have a violent felony, but you've been involved in how many Ponzi schemes? You've been doing how many pyramid schemes? You know what I'm saying? I think they're looking through it all, and I'm never like, woohoo, the government can look at you, but I'm also been through enough in the last 15 years where I can see where those protections are needed. I have seen people come straight out of federal prison, be an extremely well-organized con artist and set up dispensaries and walk out the back door with everything and without a trace.
They do it in all sorts of businesses.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, even teachers have to be, you know, even when I was a lifeguard, I had to be fingerprinted.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Thank God.
if you're doing anything that's involved with the safety or medication of the public, you've got to be verified.
But
Every part of it.
I totally agree
But
with that.
Well,
how
I was a
many
lifeguard back then
growers
when we
are
did it.
you going to find that are gonna put their name and their address of their grow? It's like the whole, there's going to only, it's gonna limit the number of legitimate growers. And it's sad to me because I'd rather see people just be able to come into compliance and be decriminalized and just understand this as agriculture, but we're not quite there yet.
Can the
I have
Republicans?
not read this law yet, but is it a guarantee that under the career bill, if a grower registers, state registers, is it guaranteed they are not will be raided or investigated by the FBI or the federal government?
I don't think they can ever guarantee anything like
I
that.
know the Constitution states that federal government trumps state law.
Right.
It's like, is there some kind of provision in there saying that there's like a warning or something like, hey, you're about to be investigated, or you are under investigation? Instead of an
No,
automatic
but the
boom?
thing that's going on a national level is that through Congress just passed the DEA's defunding to interfere with the medical cannabis states. Now it goes to the Senate, and we need to be calling Boxer and Feinstein and making sure that it gets approved at the Senate level, and then the DEA is defunded from going in. So in a sense, yes, but the other sticky icky in this, other than trying to get growers to register and give their name and be willing to have the FBI look through their life and see if they're, you know.
Yeah, because it's for the record, FBI is like, okay, here's a grow place right here with a dispensary. Anything illegal going on here, we can just probably sneak and look. It's like, maybe that's why some people might be cautious about, here's my address, my grow location, because they're worried about the FBI is like, hey, I'm actually doing this legally, but the FBI is messing with my life, messing with my job.
Well, people just don't.
And that's why I'm like, people might be cautious, like, is there like a provision? That's why I was wondering if there's a provision written in the
Well,
bill or something.
well, the provision's coming from the national level, which would be the defunding of the DEA in the
Gotcha.
medical cannabis states. The other
Yeah, that's
little
all gotcha.
sticky icky in here that's gonna close down a lot of people, not necessarily people in our city, but in Los Angeles. You have to have, before you can even go and apply for the state level, you have to have the permission from your jurisdiction.
That should hold down.
So in Los
Right.
Angeles,
They're gonna ban.
no, Los Angeles will have the 120 that are with ASA. Because remember, they did a voter initiative, which was basically a monopolizing effort to kick out hundreds of other dispensaries, right? So the union got together with ASA and they went into the city council in Los Angeles, bought them out, and basically got it so that their clubs only would be on the ground. We have a little of that going on in San Francisco with the CU and with Avalos,
What
right?
exactly do you have to ask permission for in the community?
You have to be able to be registered in that city. So in Los Angeles, there will only be 120 Measure D collectives that will be allowed to apply at the state level.
Why is it limited at 120 if somebody new decides to grow?
No, they can't.
Why was it limited to 120?
It was a voter initiative that was put together by corrupt means through ASA and through the union, and they went and they bought
So I didn't
the
hear the
law.
voter initiative part, that's what I was wondering, how did it happen? I didn't hear.
Voter
that part. I
initiative,
didn't hear
and
that
it
part.
happened through them buying out that city's city council, because they started all these Wild West rumors, they started the Russian and Armenian mafia rumors.
So somebody did challenge that in the high district court that they exercised the monopoly down there.
Right, but it's not gonna happen, because the city council's already so corrupt, ASA's already so corrupt. If they feel that they've got their 120 clubs, those are the only ones that are going to be able to apply at the state level. Also, if you live in a city that's instituted a ban on medical cannabis dispensaries and grow facilities, nobody from that county will be able to apply. So it upholds our state Supreme Court decision in the Riverside case, which is horrible. It basically makes it so that we've got, I think, and I could be wrong, I think we have 72 counties in California that have banned dispensaries.
Yeah.
Those bans will remain in place.
I'm confused on those bans.
Amiano's legislation did nothing about those bans either. So we have a situation where, depending on your zip code, depends on your access, which to me
That's not fair.
is so unfair, because the rural patient then has to, if they're disabled, they have to talk a friend into driving them into the next county. They gotta pay for that gas. They probably have to give that friend some of their medicine for driving them there. It takes a whole day probably.
No, I'm confused somewhat on this, because like in Palm Springs, Cathedral City, which are in Riverside County, there are dispensaries that are open and running. And they're legal and licensed, so why are they, I mean, they're legal and licensed by the city and local communities. They're paying their taxes,
There's,
I've been to them.
but in Riverside County, there's not.
But they are, those cities are in Riverside County.
Well, then those cities haven't instituted a ban.
No, those cities have not.
But
County,
the,
oh, so the county territories, but the city's gonna override the county on that decision and put it within their communities.
No, county trumps city, state
Usually,
trumps county, government
Yeah, but
trumps
that
state.
can vary, that varies too. There are some
According to
places-
the California state constitution, it goes basically.
Well, that's the same as the federal, but don't forget
City,
states,
county,
states still have a right
city,
over
county, state,
federal, and
federal.
cities still have right over government in certain areas.
well, the
There's
big
jurisdiction.
Unincorporated areas.
Right, only
Right.
incorporated.
and a lot of the unincorporated areas might be where you see some stuff pop up, but still, now in unincorporated areas, you still, in order to be able to apply for the state licensure, you're going to have something from that jurisdiction that says, we're cool with this guy. So you can see that this was a combination of law enforcement working with the League of Cities. The League of Cities is saying, hey, you want cannabis in your city? Cool. I don't want it in mine. Let's work together and get something where you can have your laws in your city, but I can have my laws in my city. And in my city or my county, I don't want anybody to be state registered. So again, you end up with this kind of ucky situation. And it's sad because neither Tom Amiano, who's supposed to be our leading liberal, or Senator Lou Correa, which I don't think he's known as a conservative, but he certainly isn't known as a liberal. Neither one did anything for patients' access in areas where there's bans in place, which is sad. That's not patient-friendly. Neither one of these bills were patient-friendly or created by patients. You had on one side, you had a huge commercial industry looking to monopolize, and on the other side, you had, the cops in the cities saying, we want to do this, but we want to do it in a restricted and legal manner. We want it to be something like what Colorado is doing, which is better for them to say they want it something like what Colorado is doing than something like what Washington State's doing, because I hope everybody knows the state right above us basically has outlawed patient grows just across the board. And then the whole country above us, Canada, is licensing, I think, 2 cultivation companies.
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
So, I mean, we don't have the worst thing in the world going on, but we have a cycle coming up soon, like, perhaps even before the recess, this could become law. And I don't think that I think it's sort of like a hush and push. I mean, I don't hear people talking about it. I haven't seen much news coverage.
This almost sounds like